The gas station looked normal during the day. Just pumps, snacks, and tired customers. But when my shift started at 11 p.m., the manager handed me a piece of paper. On it was a list of rules. I laughed at first, until I broke rule number 3. The gas station looked completely normal during the day. I had passed it dozens of times before, just another roadside stop with a small shop, a few fuel pumps, and a flickering sign that never seemed fully repaired. It wasn't the kind of place you remembered, which is exactly why I took the job. Night shift, easy money, quiet hours. That's what the manager had told me. My shift started at 11 p.m. By the time I arrived, the sky was completely black, and the road leading to the station was empty. No passing cars, no headlights in the distance, just the low hum of electricity and the buzzing lights above the pumps. It already felt off. I parked near the entrance and stepped out. The air was colder than it should have been for that time of year. As the automatic doors slid open, a faint chime echoed through the store, too loud for such a small space. Inside, everything looked normal. But it didn't feel normal. The shelves were fully stocked, perfectly aligned, like no one had touched anything in hours. The refrigerators hummed quietly at the back. The clock above the counter ticked louder than expected. And behind the counter stood the manager. He looked older than I remembered. Thin, pale, his eyes were heavy, like he hadn't slept in days. "You're here," he said. Not welcoming, not surprised, just stating a fact. "Yeah," I replied. "First shift." He nodded slowly, then reached under the counter and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it in front of me. "You need to read this." I picked it up. At first, I thought it was a checklist. Maybe cleaning duties or closing tasks. But it wasn't. It was a list of rules. Numbered, precise, and strange. Lock the front door at exactly 1:13 a.m. If pump number 4 turns on by itself, do not look outside. I let out a small laugh. "Is this serious?" The manager didn't smile. "You follow every rule," he said. "No exceptions." Something in his voice made my chest feel tight. I looked back down at the paper, then up at him again. "What happens if I don't?" For a second, he didn't answer. Then he leaned slightly closer across the counter. "You won't get the chance to ask that twice." The words landed heavier than they should have. Before I could respond, he grabbed his jacket and walked toward the door. He stopped just before stepping outside. "If someone walks in wearing a black coat," he said quietly, "you pretend they're not there." Then he left. The door slid shut behind him. And just like that, I was alone. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. 11:08 p.m. My first night shift had just begun. And somehow, I already felt like I shouldn't be there. I stood behind the counter, staring at the paper in my hands. At first glance, it looked like a normal list. But the longer I looked, the worse it got. The handwriting was neat, careful, like whoever wrote it wanted to make sure there were no misunderstandings. At the top, it simply said, "Night shift rules, follow exactly." I swallowed and started reading. Rule 1. Lock the front door at exactly 1:13 a.m. Not before, not after. Keep it locked for 3 minutes. If someone tries to come in during that time, do not let them in. No matter what they say. I frowned. That was weird, but maybe it was some kind of security thing. I kept reading. Rule 2. If you hear the front door bell ring, but no one is there, do not leave the counter to check. Wait exactly 60 seconds. If the bell rings a second time, you may continue as normal. A small chill ran down my spine. Okay, still manageable. Rule 3. If a man wearing a black coat enters the store, do not acknowledge him. Do not speak to him. Do not make eye contact. If he places something on the counter, step away and go to the storage room for 2 minutes. My grip on the paper tightened. This wasn't funny anymore. I quickly glanced at the empty entrance. Still nothing. I went back to the list. Rule 4. If pump number 4 activates by itself, do not look outside. Turn off the lights behind the counter and remain still until the pump stops. Rule 5. At 2 a.m., the refrigerator at the back may stop humming. Do not approach it. Do not open it. The sound will return on its own. My heart started beating faster. The rules weren't random. They were specific. Too specific. Like they were written after something had already happened. I kept reading. Rule 6. If you see someone standing in the reflection of the glass doors, do not turn around. There should be no one behind you. I froze. Slowly, I looked up at the glass entrance. My reflection stared back at me. Alone. I exhaled and forced myself to keep reading. Rule 7. If the lights flicker more than 3 times, go to the storage room immediately and lock the door. Stay inside until the lights stabilize. Rule 8. Do not check the cameras between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. No explanation. Just that. I flipped the paper over. There was one final rule. Written slightly darker than the others. Like the pen had pressed harder into the paper. Rule 9. If you break any of the rules, do not leave the store. I stared at that line longer than I should have. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Like the building itself was listening. The clock ticked behind me. 11:26 p.m. Still hours left. And suddenly, I wasn't sure I wanted to finish this shift. I tried to act normal. That was the first mistake. I folded the paper slowly and placed it beside the register, telling myself it was just some kind of prank. Maybe the manager liked messing with new employees. Maybe this was his idea of a joke. It had to be. I forced myself to move. I straightened a few items on the counter, wiped down a surface that was already clean, anything to keep my mind off the rules. The silence didn't help. It was too quiet. No cars passing. No distant sounds from the road. Just the low hum of the lights and the steady ticking of the clock behind me. 11:41 p.m. I checked the entrance again. Empty. See, I muttered to myself, nothing's happening. And then, ding, the sound cut through the store like a knife. The front door bell. I froze. Slowly, I looked up. The glass doors were closed. No one there. My stomach tightened. Rule 2. If you hear the front door bell ring, but no one is there, do not leave the counter. I felt a sudden urge to walk over. To check. To prove to myself it was just a glitch. Maybe the wind. Maybe the sensor was broken. I took a step forward. And stopped. Something about the silence felt heavier now. Like I wasn't alone anymore. I forced myself to stay behind the counter. Just wait, I whispered. 60 seconds. That's what the rule said. Just 60 seconds. I stared at the clock. Each second felt slower than the last. The hum of the lights seemed louder. My breathing too. I kept my eyes locked on the entrance. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. 50 seconds. 55. 59. And then, ding. I flinched. The sound echoed again, sharper this time. But still, no one, no movement, no door opening, just that empty entrance staring back at me. My chest felt tight. The rule said if it rang a second time, I could continue as normal. Normal, right. I let out a shaky breath and tried to relax. See, it's fine, I said quietly. But even as I said it, I noticed something. The reflection in the glass doors. At first, it looked like nothing. Just the store behind me. The shelves. The lights. Me. But then, something shifted. A shape. Faint. Standing somewhere behind the aisles. Not moving. Not clear enough to see. But definitely not there before. My blood ran cold. Rule 6. If you see someone in the reflection, do not turn around. I stood completely still. Every instinct screamed at me to look. To turn. To check. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew, if I turned around, I wouldn't be alone anymore. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to spin around and face whatever was standing behind me, but the rule was clear. Do not turn around. So I stood there, frozen behind the counter, my eyes locked onto the reflection in the glass doors. The shape didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I tried to focus on my breathing. Slow, quiet, controlled. This isn't real, I whispered under my breath. It's just your imagination. But even as I said it, the lights flickered. Once, twice. I held my breath. A third flicker almost came. But stopped. Silence. The figure in the reflection was gone. Just like that. I blinked, unsure if I had imagined the whole thing. Slowly, carefully, I shifted my gaze away from the glass doors and focused back on the counter. Okay, I muttered. Okay, you're fine. Then, beep, a sharp electronic sound cut through the air. I jumped. It came from the register screen. A notification. I leaned closer. Pump 4, activated. My stomach dropped. No, I whispered. I hadn't pressed anything. There were no cars outside. No one had come in. And yet, pump number 4 was running. The numbers on the screen started climbing. 0.00, 0.12, 0.27. Fuel was being dispensed. But to who? My heart started pounding. Slowly, against my better judgment, I began to lift my head. To look outside. To check. To prove it was nothing. Then I stopped. Rule 4. If pump number 4 activates by itself, do not look outside. I clenched my jaw and forced my eyes shut for a second. Don't look, I told myself. Just don't look. The beeping continued. The numbers kept rising. It sounded wrong. Too fast. Too aggressive. Like something was forcing the fuel through the pump. I reached behind the counter and quickly switched off the lights. Darkness swallowed the store, leaving only the faint glow from the machines. I stood completely still, not moving, not breathing. The sound of the pump grew louder, then slower, then it stopped. Silence, total silence. A few seconds passed, maybe more. I didn't move. I didn't dare. Finally, I turned the lights back on. The store looked the same. Normal, empty. I swallowed and slowly looked down at the register. Pump 4, transaction complete. Amount, €67.43. My chest tightened. There was only one way to confirm it. And this time, I couldn't stop myself. I looked outside. The pump stood alone under the buzzing light. No car, no person, but the nozzle wasn't in its holder anymore. It hung loosely, swaying slightly, like someone had just let go of it and walked away. I couldn't stop staring at pump number 4. The nozzle was still moving slightly, like it had just been released. There was no one there. No car, no footsteps, no sound of an engine fading into the distance. Nothing. A cold feeling settled deep in my chest. Okay, I whispered. That's not normal. The words felt useless the moment I said them. Of course it wasn't normal. None of this was. I forced myself to look away from the window and step back behind the counter. My hands were slightly shaking now. Not enough to lose control, but enough to notice. I tried to focus on something simple. The register, the shelves, anything real, anything that made sense. The clock read 12:09 a.m. Still hours left. Too many hours. And then, ding, the doorbell rang. My entire body went still. Slowly, I turned my head toward the entrance. This time, the door was open, and someone was standing there. A man, tall, completely still, wearing a long black coat. My heart dropped instantly. Rule 3. Do not acknowledge him. Do not speak to him. Do not make eye contact. I looked down immediately, my breath catching in my throat. Don't react, I whispered to myself. Just don't react. The door slid shut behind him with a soft click. I could hear his footsteps now. Slow, heavy, deliberate, each step echoing louder than it should have in the empty store. I kept my eyes locked on the counter, but I could see him. in the reflection of the register screen. He was moving closer, 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 until he stopped, right in front of me. I could feel him there, standing just across the counter, watching, waiting, my hands clenched tightly. Don't look up, don't speak, don't move. A few seconds passed, then, a soft sound, something being placed on the counter. I flinched slightly but didn't lift my head. I already knew what it was. He had put something down. The rule: if he places something on the counter, go to the storage room. I hesitated, just for a second, and in that second, I made a mistake. I looked up, just slightly, just enough to see his face, or at least, where his face should have been. My breath stopped. There was something wrong, deeply wrong. I snapped my eyes shut and stepped back immediately. No, I whispered. No, no. I turned and rushed toward the storage room, my heart pounding violently in my chest. Behind me, I heard something move, fast, too fast, like he had leaned forward, like he was about to reach across the counter. I grabbed the storage door, pulled it open, and slammed it shut behind me, locking it with shaking hands. Silence, heavy, oppressive silence. I backed away slowly into the darkness of the storage room, my breathing loud, uncontrolled, and then, from the other side of the door, I heard it, a slow, deliberate knock, 3 times. I didn't move. The 3 knocks echoed through the metal door and into my chest, like they came from inside me instead of outside. 1, 2, 3, then silence. I stood there in the dark storage room, my back pressed against a stack of cardboard boxes, trying to control my breathing. The air smelled stale, like dust and something faintly sour, like old milk left too long in the sun. 2 minutes, I whispered. Just stay here for 2 minutes. That's what the rule said. If he places something on the counter, go to the storage room for 2 minutes. I fumbled for my phone, the screen lighting up my shaking hands. 12:11 a.m. I started a timer. 0 right pointing arrow 2 o'clock. Don't open the door, I told myself. No matter what. At first, there was nothing. Just silence. Then, a soft scrape, right against the other side of the door, like fingernails dragging slowly across metal. I froze. The sound moved, left to right, then back again. Slow, patient, testing. My timer hit 1:12. Almost there. Then, a voice, muffled through the door, low, calm. Hey, you forgot something. My throat tightened. It sounded almost normal, almost friendly. That thing you always say, the voice continued softly. Customer comes first. I squeezed my eyes shut. No, I whispered. Not real, not real. The handle shifted slightly, not opening, just moving, as if someone was gently trying it. My timer ticked to 1:34. The voice came again, closer now. You looked at me. A pause, long enough to feel intentional. You weren't supposed to do that. My chest felt like it was caving in. I stared at the timer. 1:49, 1:50. The scraping stopped. The voice disappeared. Silence returned, thicker than before. 1:56, 1:57, 1:58, 1:59, 2 o'clock. The timer beeped. Too loud, way too loud. I flinched and quickly silenced it, holding my breath. Nothing happened. No voice, no movement, no sound at all. I waited. 5 seconds. 10, 20. Still nothing. Slowly, carefully, I stepped closer to the door. My hand hovered over the lock. Every instinct told me not to open it. But the rule was clear. 2 minutes. No more, no less. I swallowed hard, and unlocked the door. For a second, I didn't move. Then I pulled it open. The store lights spilled into the room. Everything looked normal, empty, quiet. The counter stood untouched. But something was wrong. Something small. Something I hadn't noticed before. On the counter, right where he had been standing, there was an item, waiting, and I knew I hadn't left it there. I didn't want to go back out there. Every part of me was telling me to stay in the storage room, lock the door again, and wait until morning. But I couldn't. The rule had been clear. 2 minutes, not longer, not shorter. So I stepped out, slowly, carefully. The store looked exactly the same as before. Lights steady, shelves untouched, the hum of the refrigerators back to normal. No sign of him, but the air felt different. Heavier, like something had changed while I was hiding. My eyes moved immediately to the counter. And there it was, the item, sitting exactly where he had placed it. I approached it slowly, my footsteps quiet against the floor. It looked simple, too simple, just a small, rectangular object. Dark, worn. I reached out, hesitated, then picked it up. My fingers went cold the moment I touched it. It was a photograph, old, the edges slightly bent, like it had been carried around for years. I turned it over, and my stomach dropped. It was this gas station. Same layout, same pumps, same flickering lights above them. But something was wrong. The colors were faded, and the building looked older, much older, like the picture had been taken years ago. I leaned closer. There were people in the photo. 3 of them, standing in front of the entrance. One was the manager, younger, but unmistakably him. The second was someone I didn't recognize. A man in a uniform, maybe another worker. And the third, my breath caught. The third figure stood slightly apart from the others, wearing a long black coat. But his face, it wasn't clear. It looked blurred, like the camera hadn't been able to capture it properly, or like something had been removed. My hands started to shake. I flipped the photo over again. There was writing on the back. Faded ink, barely readable. I held it closer to the light. Night shift, don't serve him. A cold wave ran through my body. Don't serve him. I whispered the words out loud. My mind flashed back to the rules. Rule 3. Do not acknowledge him. Do not speak to him. My grip tightened around the photo. Why? What happens if you do? Before I could think further. Click. A sharp sound came from above. I looked up. The small security monitor behind the counter flickered to life. I hadn't turned it on. I was sure of it. The screen showed the outside view. The pumps. The empty road. Everything normal. Then, the image glitched. Static for a split second. And when it came back, I felt my blood turn to ice. Someone was standing at pump number 4. Perfectly still. Facing the camera. Wearing a black coat. Slowly, very slowly, the figure lifted its head. And even through the grainy screen, I could tell, it was looking directly at me. I couldn't move. My eyes were locked onto the monitor. The figure at pump number 4 stood perfectly still, facing the camera. Even through the static and distortion, I could feel it staring at me. Not at the store, not at the road, at me. This isn't possible, I whispered. The pumps outside were empty. I had just looked. There was no one there. My chest tightened as I slowly turned my head toward the glass doors. The outside looked exactly the same as before. Empty, silent, no figure, no movement. I snapped my gaze back to the monitor. The figure was still there. Closer now, not walking, just closer, like the camera had skipped something. Or something had skipped time. A cold sweat ran down my back. Rule 8. Do not check the cameras between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. My eyes flicked to the clock. 2:34 a.m. My stomach dropped. No, I breathed. No, no, no. I hadn't even realized the time. The screen flickered again. Static filled the monitor for a second longer this time. When the image returned, the camera angle had changed. It wasn't showing the pumps anymore. It was showing the inside of the store. I felt my throat close. The angle was from the corner near the ceiling, facing the counter, facing me, and I was there, standing exactly where I was now, holding the photograph, frozen, But something was wrong. The version of me on the screen wasn't moving. I slowly lifted my hand in real life. On the monitor, nothing. My reflection stayed completely still. A delayed recording. No, it wasn't delayed. It was watching me. Then, the version of me on the screen moved. But not like I did. It tilted its head slightly. Too slowly. Too deliberate. My heart slammed against my chest. "That's not me," I whispered. The figure in the recording, me, or whatever it was, raised its hand. And pointed. Not at the camera. Not at the door. It pointed behind itself. Behind the counter. Toward the storage room. My blood ran cold. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me not to turn around. But something felt wrong. Worse than before. Because this time, there was no rule telling me what to do. Slowly, against my better judgment, I turned. The hallway leading to the storage room stretched out in front of me. Longer than I remembered. Darker. The light at the end flickered weakly. And the storage door was open. I was sure I had closed it. Locked it. But now, it stood slightly ajar. A thin line of darkness visible inside. I felt something shift behind me. A faint movement. I turned back to the monitor. And my breath stopped. The version of me on the screen was gone. The camera now showed the counter. Empty. But in the reflection of the glass doors, someone was standing there, right behind where I had been. Tall, still, wearing a black coat. And this time, there was no doubt, it wasn't outside anymore, it was inside. I didn't wait. The moment I realized it was inside, I ran. My body moved before my mind could catch up, instinct taking over as I bolted away from the counter. The sound of my footsteps slammed against the floor, loud and desperate in the empty store. Behind me, something moved. Fast. Too fast. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could hear it. Not footsteps. Not exactly. More like something dragging and snapping back into place with every movement. Like it wasn't used to moving the way it was trying to. I rushed past the aisles, nearly knocking over a stand of snacks as I pushed toward the back of the store. "Think," I shouted to myself. "Think. The rules. There had to be something in the rules. Lights flicker. Go to the storage room." No, I had just come from there. Cameras. Don't check them. Too late. My chest burned as I reached the end of the aisle and turned sharply. And froze. The path to the front door looked wrong. Too long. The distance stretched unnaturally, like the store had doubled in size. No, no, no. I stumbled back. The exit was there, but it wasn't reachable. The lights above me flickered violently now, once, twice, 3 times. I didn't hesitate. I turned and sprinted straight for the storage room. Behind me, that sound again. Closer, right behind me now. I could feel it. Cold, breathing, almost touching me. I slammed into the storage door, threw it open, and dove inside, pulling it shut with all my strength. The moment the lock clicked, silence, immediate, total. I collapsed against the door, gasping for air, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. Nothing followed me in. Nothing tried to open the door. It just stopped. Like it couldn't enter. Like it wasn't allowed. I slid down to the floor, trying to steady my breathing. "This place," I whispered. "What is this place?" Then I remembered something. Rule 9. If you break any of the rules, do not leave the store. My blood ran cold. I had broken one. I looked at him. Even for a second, I had looked. A slow realization crept in. This wasn't about surviving the night. This was about staying. Forever. A faint sound pulled me out of my thoughts. Soft. Right behind me. From the door. A whisper. So quiet I almost didn't hear it. "You can't leave." My eyes widened. Then, a second voice. Identical. But coming from inside the room. "You're already part of it." I stopped breathing. Slowly, I turned my head toward the darkness behind me. And in that darkness, Something shifted. I don't remember how long I stayed in that storage room. Minutes, hours, maybe longer. Time didn't feel right anymore. At some point, I stopped hearing the whispering. Stopped hearing anything at all. The silence became normal. My breathing slowed. My thoughts faded. And without realizing it, I stood up. The door was right in front of me. Closed. Unlocked. I didn't remember unlocking it. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then, slowly, I opened it. The store looked normal. Bright, quiet, safe. Sunlight poured in through the glass doors, washing away the darkness from before. The hum of the refrigerators sounded steady again. The shelves were neat. Everything was exactly how it should be. Like nothing had ever happened. I stepped out from behind the counter. No fear, no hesitation. Just calm. The clock read 6:02 a.m. My shift was over. I walked toward the entrance. Each step felt light, easy, like I had done this 100 times before. My hand reached for the door. And stopped. Rule 9. If you break any of the rules, do not leave the store. I stood there for a long moment. Then slowly, I lowered my hand. Something in me understood. I wasn't going home. I turned back toward the counter. And without thinking, I stepped behind it, right where I had been all night, waiting. The bell above the door rang. Ding. I looked up. A young guy stood there. Early 20s. Confused expression. Keys in his hand. Hey, he said. I'm here for the morning shift. I stared at him for a second, then reached under the counter. My hand moved on its own, pulling out a folded piece of paper. I placed it in front of him. This is important, I said. My voice sounded different. Calm, flat, like I had said those words many times before. He picked up the paper and frowned slightly. What is this? I didn't answer. I just watched him. He let out a small laugh. Rules, he said. Seriously, I said nothing, just like the manager hadn't. He looked back up at me. Wait, you're leaving, right? For a moment, I almost answered, almost told him everything, but the words never came. Instead, I stepped back, letting him take my place behind the counter. Then I turned, and walked toward the storage room. The door creaked open slowly. Darkness waited inside, familiar, quiet. As I stepped in, I heard the bell ring again behind me. Ding, and just before the door closed, I heard him say it. Okay, first rule. The door shut, and the darkness welcomed me back.